years has had a mandate for full employment and stable prices. Well, they haven't been doing so well, and as years go on, it gets worse. They're down to a 2-cent dollar compared to the dollar of 1913 that they were entrusted to. So the unemployment rate, when you look at it honestly, is closer to 20% than the 7 or 8 or 9% that they claim. There's no such thing that we've experienced for a long, long time with stable prices. So I would give the Federal Reserve a very, very low grade. I would think, I don't know whether it's an F or an F minus, but it's very, very The one thing that we have to understand about monetary policy is if we oppose big government, which I'm assuming that just about everybody in this audience is opposing big government. So long is always at the expense of liberty. So if you advocate big government, you always have to sacrifice some portion of our personal liberty. So this is the reason that if once you come around to endorsing the basic principle of liberty, you have to be in opposition, to big government and the financing of big government through the Federal Reserve System. What would happen if you didn't have a Federal Reserve to facilitate big government is the government would have to pay their bills. And if they didn't have enough taxation, they would have to borrow the money. But if you didn't have the Fed to buy the debt, then it would stop, because if they were spending too much, interest rates would go up and they would recognize that we can't afford it. The fact that we can borrow, and we have been sort of given the blessing of a reserve currency, it has allowed this borrowing to go on too long and the inflation to go on too long. But what has happened in these last 4 years is that the attitude has changed. The people are waking up in two areas. The economic crisis has hit. People know that we're not going to come flying out of this, that we have to have structural changes, and they're also fed up with our foreign policy, and they want our troops to come home. Personnel donates more money to our campaign than all the other campaigns. The individuals who have been fighting these wars, going over there 3 and 4 and 5 times, they know what it's like. It's one of the, psychologically, it's one of the most overbearing wars that we have ever been in. Even in World War II, the length of time that our soldiers were exposed to potential immediate danger was very short compared to what's going on now, and you add this up. And it is understandable why so many are coming home. Not only do they have head injuries, but they have this post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it's real, and they're suffering for it. We now have an epidemic of suicide. We're losing more of our military personnel from suicide, from the fighting over there. But it's deeply flawed in foreign policy, getting individuals involved in wars that have not been declared, they're not moral, they're not constitutional, and it doesn't make sense. We don't know why we're there. We don't know why it's in. Why does somebody want to go over there and get shot at and get killed and see no end to it? It's very frustrating, and that is the reason that if we care about our active duty people, if we care about our national defense, if we care about our veterans, we change our foreign policy to defend this country and not be the policeman of the world. $4 trillion would have been spent here at home. It would have been our money. We wouldn't have had borrowed, we wouldn't have had to print it, we wouldn't have had the inflation, we wouldn't have as much complication with the business cycle. But it is driving us into deep debt. And all great nations who overextend themselves overseas and develop empires, they always come down because they become arrogant and they stretch themselves too thinly around the world. And today, unfortunately, our declaration of war is this declaration of war, of the global war on terror. It has been announced that it's every place, any time, in any country that we have assumed that we have the moral authority to drop missiles and bombs and drones in any country. And believe me, they don't like it. And the other people resent it. And they would like it much better if we promoted our goodness by setting a good example here at home. And one thing about the military, we don't have to worry about any other country ever invading us and attacking us. We are by far the strongest ever in the history of the world. We have more weapons than everybody else put together, and we have an efficient army if they have to fight. But our problem isn't a foreign invasion. Our problem is the other half of our oath of office when we swear to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Vietnam, during the period of time I was in the military, I was drafted in 1962 during the Cuban crisis and was in for 5 years. But after the war finally ended in Vietnam, and obviously without victory for us, after losing 60,000 Americans, over 1 million Vietnamese who died, and how many wounded we have, and all the money we spent, which ushered in a whole decade of economic crisis in the 70s. But shortly after the war ended, a colonel for us, an American colonel by the name of Harry Summers, met with Colonel Tu, who was Vietnamese. And they got together and they were talking and they were cleaning up the mess, and these are the rules, and we were leaving, this sort of thing. And our colonel said to the Vietnamese colonel, said, you know, you never defeated us once on the battlefield. We always won militarily. And you know, Tu said to him, he says, you are right, but it's irrelevant. Because he did not understand, we didn't understand then, and we don't understand now. We can have a military power, and we can bomb and kill and occupy and pretend we're democratizing these countries. But what is much more important is winning the hearts and the minds of the people. And you can't do that. You can't destroy the ability of people to want to take care of their homeland. The whole idea of the Taliban is not to be anti-American. They're anti-occupiers. We worked with the Taliban when the Soviets were occupying Afghanistan, and now we're on the receiving end of it.